you're somebody that is traumatized and you're planning on reading books about it, these are things I would recommend, especially if you're looking into reading books like The Body Keeps the Score. It's something I wish people knew before they started reading any book on trauma, especially with The Body Keeps the Score. So anytime you go to start reading books on trauma, it's so important to know who those books are written for. So like The Body Keeps the Score, people start reading not knowing that book is meant for professionals. So it is a very heavy book because it has a lot of case studies in it, because it is meant for professionals. And so there's a lot of areas that it's not going to tread lightly on how they present the information. A lot of people might get upset about the type of case studies that they even present because it may be presented from an abuser that has also faced trauma in their life, but now as a therapist, somebody has to treat that person, so they're still going to present those case studies for that. So for myself, I'm not somebody that would personally forgive that person. However, that is somebody's job to do that and actually have to work through the therapy of somebody that was an abuser. So that's something to really keep in mind with books on trauma, is that a lot of these books, you need to know who they're written for. Also, I see so many people making comments about The Body Keeps the Score and how traumatizing it is. It goes into a lot of details of the horrific things that happen to people. Like I said, I've read a lot of books on trauma, and I'm gonna be honest, all of the books that I've read on trauma go into great detail about the traumatic events that happen. It can be helpful because it can provide additional knowledge so you can have reference from where the patient was. So I do understand where it's coming from, but keep that in mind with any book on trauma. It is traumatizing. Like, any book that you read on trauma is traumatizing. And if you're somebody that's like, no, this book I read, then please let me know of that book, because I'd like to add it to books I want to read on trauma. But another issue that I see with reviews on books on trauma is that people will read the books and then feel that it's going to give them the solution to how to feel better, but no trauma book is going to give a set solution for your trauma, because what all of these books are going into is that there's no set solution, one set solution that's going to work on everybody. So most of these books are giving a broad range of the different case studies of what has helped for each patient. They can't go super in depth of ways to actually address those problems, or else they would have to write a whole new book on therapy. That would be just going to school for therapy. So none of these books are going to have a specific thing that, like, okay, practice this and you're going to feel better. They don't have that. For instance, in The Body Keep the Score, these are ones that stood out to me. EMDR, somatic experiencing, internal family systems. Love internal family systems. All of these books are just going to give you different options that you have to then go and venture on your own. I implore you to look into it further and learn more about the solutions that they provide that pique your specific interest. I would say have an understanding of what kind of therapy that you feel works for you and is right for you. And sometimes you may think a therapy is right for you, and then later on down the line realize that it actually may have not been effective in the long run or whatever. So having that non-judgment, and then also if it's worked for you, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for everybody. I don't like cognitive behavioral therapy, but however, I still like learning all types of therapy just because it's an interest of mine. That goes into my next point. I would say all of these books have really great information that you can learn something from. What I like to say is chew it up and spit out the bone. So take in the information and keep what you feel is beneficial for you. Yeah, so I would say keep an open mind on the books that you're reading. Know who the books are made for. Learn what kind of therapy you feel is beneficial for you and works for you, but also know that it's not going to be the same solution for you that it is for somebody else. These books are not going to have a set solution for you. If anything that you read piques your interest, look into that further, read articles on it, learn more about it for what's going to help with your healing. Keep in mind, most books on trauma are very traumatizing. If you have recommendations on books for PTSD and trauma or complex PTSD that are not like that, please let me know and I'd be happy to read it. Try not to be so harsh on judgment with these books and just immediately closing it off to like, oh, I don't want to read this. This is traumatic, because I feel like books on trauma are going to be traumatic too, because that is the experience. If they're showing anything other than trauma, it would be a lie to our experience. If it was all just good and happy, I would be like, well, you don't know what I've been through. I forgot to say this, I'm a hit and run survivor, so I do have experience in trauma or PTSD. Some people are sexist and like, well, what's your trauma? But I was hit by a car, so that's my qualifications, I guess you could say. And on top of that, it's one of my very focused interests, you could say. So I'm interested in trauma, how it affects the brain. Something I feel like more people should be aware of when looking into reading books on trauma. And also take breaks from reading books on trauma. I always read a very light-hearted book after, so and like easy to read in between, and sometimes I even have to take breaks. But The Body Keeps the Score, I definitely did. But yeah, I hope this can help someone.